Addiction is not the problem. Addiction is actually the solution. Let me show you what I mean. In this cycle, we're going to start with trauma. And trauma doesn't have to be a big, overwhelming event, although it could be. For purposes of this, we're going to expand the definition of trauma to be hurt, woundings, or just anything that shaped the individual and the unconscious in such a way that when faced with certain triggers in the present moment, they're kind of thrown back in time and perceive it as a threat. So when we talk about trauma here, we're going to say a perceived threat. You'll hear me say often that I believe we confuse discomfort with threat and then respond to it as if it's so. This trauma or shaping sets that up. And then when faced with a current event, the person feels a level of discomfort or stress. Stress is the relationship to the trauma and a relationship to history that has the present moment feeling overwhelming. And when stress or discomfort get big enough, we look for relief. And when we look for relief enough in such a way that it becomes like a medication, that's how addiction and addictive behaviors form. The addiction is the search for relief. Now, when I say it's not the problem, it's the solution, it's a solution that then becomes problematic. What happens to the body, the brain, and to the human being in addiction becomes its own trauma, and the cycle just repeats. But the most important thing is that addiction is not the problem, it's the solution. The question becomes, what is it the solution to? What is the person seeking relief from? Once we answer that question, then we can start to dig deeper and people can find freedom from powerful addictive substances and behaviors that almost seem like they could never stop. This is a framework within which to view addiction and addictive behaviors. It's not always this way for everybody. There are ways that people enter addiction outside of this. But again and again, I find that when we can ask the person, what are they using the addiction for? Number one, it asks a question that gets us a little bit deeper and what are the behaviors and the subconscious beliefs and unconscious patterns that are driving the person, the things that they aren't aware of. But it also begins to reduce the shame. And shame is a great blocker of healing for people, especially those in addiction. They don't even want to talk about it, or they don't know how to talk about it, or the people that they're talking to about it don't know how to relate to it or listen to it. So this is a framework where we can start to understand what is the stressors that are driving the need for relief and what are the shapings that created those stressors. Once we know that, the person can understand themselves a bit more and put in tools and practices that can help them not only relieve themselves from the addiction and reduce stress, but understand what are the causes and conditions and the situations that they walk into on a daily basis that might be fertile ground for stress to rise. And then life becomes a little bit more workable and easy to move through. Part of the nervous system can be seen almost like a smoke alarm. When it perceives threat, it sends off a signal and we go into action. However, the nervous system cannot always tell the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. And we don't want it to. We don't want that part of our nervous system responsible for our survival to stop, to slow down, and make a measured decision in the moment. We want it to be able to send our body into action so that when we have something that we really need to survive, we can live through it. Let me show you what I mean. We have two scenarios here. In this scenario, I'm sitting in a house with my friends, family, we're having a nice time, and I smell smoke and I see flames of a fire that nobody else sees. And I go into immediate reaction and I start yelling and screaming and grabbing everybody, pulling them out by their clothes and their hair, and I get them outside, and right as I get everybody outside and to safety, the house is engulfed in flames. We survive, everybody cheers me on, and I'm the hero. This was a real threat, a real fire. I went into reaction, I'm the hero. It's an appropriate response at an appropriate time. Scenario 2, perceived threat. I'm sitting in that same house with my friends and family, having a dinner party, having a nice time, and I'm sure I see a fire. Something has triggered me to the point that I smell smoke and I maybe even am sure that I see flames, but they're not actually there. And I go into reaction. I start pulling everybody out, yelling and screaming and pulling them by their clothes and their hair, and I get them outside to a safe distance from the house, and nothing happens. In that scenario, I'm going to look insane. I might lose my friends. My family might call the hospital. It's an appropriate response based on if there was an actual fire, so it's an appropriate response at an inappropriate time. This happens all of the time in our reactions to events. We'll confuse discomfort with threat and then respond to something that's uncomfortable as if it's threatening. That a note from my boss, a look from my wife will send me into this perceived threat that things aren't going to be okay. I see fire, I see smoke, and I go into reaction. That's not an effective way to walk through life. So first, we just want to understand that our nervous system will respond to real threat and perceived threat in the same way. It's up to us to be able to build the capacity to experience distress, to be able to feel bad, to feel discomfort, and in those moments, determine if it's actual or perceived threat. Most of the things we face on a daily basis are perceived threat. Most of the things that we face on a daily basis aren't going to kill us in that moment. And anything that's not going to kill us in that moment can wait. If we're not in immediate physical danger, there's nothing that can't wait 45 seconds, 45 minutes, a day for our nervous system to be able to settle and for us to be able to go into a response rather than an automatic reaction. Spend some time, look back through your last few days and notice if there's times that even subtly you went into reaction over a perceived threat when maybe your nervous system was telling you it was an actual threat. Addictions don't just start overnight. In fact, in the beginning, they might be something that enhance somebody's social life, they can add to life, but over time, it starts to take from it. This is a modified version of the Jellinek curve, which was a curve that developed in the earlier part of the 20th century by a Stanford doctor that showed the descent into alcoholism and the ascent into recovery. But this can be applied to almost any addiction. Again, it's modified. There's much more to it if you want to research the Jellinek curve. But for our purposes today, we're just going to talk about, we'll talk about drinking. It often starts as something social, something that people do together. It's part of our culture. It's a social lubricant. It can often add to people's lives. For some people, though, it moves from being social to being more regular. And they're finding that they're doing it maybe on their own, outside of social environments, not in the environments that call for it, finding environments to go to in order to drink, creating occasions for that. And then there's a point at which really it becomes more medicinal, that they need it. And actually with alcohol, we can become physically addicted to it in a way that the body will shake and be really uncomfortable to the point that the person has to have alcohol in order just to function. But when we talk about this medicinal phase, it's more that they're using it to find relief from some of life's conditions. And again, this is where we can apply this to other addictions other than alcoholism. And then it's to a point where they can't stop and they're just consumed by it. When they're drinking, they might be thinking about not drinking. And when they're not drinking, they might be thinking about drinking. It's consumed their lives. They need it not only to function physically, but spiritually and emotionally. And then reaching the pit of despair, which does not necessarily mean death, although it could be. But this is the point at which the person reaches what we'll hear say rock bottom. It's not really a place. It's something that the person can choose, and they can actually choose it at any time. They don't have to wait until they get to this point of desperation where they might almost be dying. You could choose that bottom earlier. At this point, they might make a choice, and they make a choice at first to be willing and have an honest desire for help. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden they're sober or they've stopped the addictive behavior, but they have an honest desire, they've asked for help, and they're willing to receive it. And then as they begin to ascend up into recovery, they begin to become aware not only of what was causing their drinking, but to really expand that beyond, to really understand who they are as human beings, what drives them, what are the unconscious and automatic patterns that might be controlling them at times that they didn't even know were there. And then build tools and practice. And here, many of these tools and practices are designed not to help the person feel good, but to help them learn how to feel bad, to build emotional resilience and a distress tolerance so that when they're faced with challenges, they don't revert back to using it as something medicinal. That they can find relief in other ways. So tools and practice, and then that develops new patterns, that these tools that they practice become ingrained so that when faced with a challenge or a stressor where it might have been before that they automatically would go to a drink, they might automatically go to one of these new tools, which are different for everybody, but could be a breath, a movement, a prayer, calling a friend, being still. And that moves them into recovery. And that finding recovery is about balance in life. And balance isn't about standing still and rigid all the time. It's about being able to move with the ups and downs of life. That as we move through life, things break and people die. We're going to face hard challenges. How are we going to face them? Are we going to face them in a way that we need to avoid it and shut it down and stuff it? Or in a way that we're going to lean into it, face it, and be free of it? And by being free, I mean being able, even in the depths of pain, to move to joy on the other side of it. To be able to move from something having its grips on you to letting go of those grips, not having it have a grip on you or you having a grip on it, and being free. That's recovery. One of the things I've come to realize in my life and after working with thousands of people is that almost nobody likes to feel bad. Nobody really likes uncomfortable emotions rising in their body. But that's just what they are. Emotions are like waves in the ocean. They rise and then they fall. When what we experience as a negative emotion, fear, shame, guilt, sadness, begins to rise, often our first reaction is to get off that wave. The problem is, if we get off that wave, there's another wave coming, and it'll be like being out in the ocean, just thrashing around, getting hit by wave after wave. That's not the solution. The solution is to be able to build resilience and tolerance to be able to ride that wave of emotion. So we can ride it all the way to the top, and then on the other side, it will settle out. Almost like we begin to surf the wave of emotion. That calls us to be uncomfortable when these come up. So how do we do that? First, when it starts to arise, name it. Name that emotion. Notice it. Notice where it is in your body. Just even saying it out loud, I'm feeling it in my chest or my fingers, that can begin to allow you to dissociate from it in a way that it's not who you are, it's something that you're experiencing. And then breathe. One of the fastest ways into the body and to build capacity is to breathe. Breathe slowly and intentionally as you're experiencing this discomfort. And then you'll stay. You'll stay on the wave and ride it to the other side. Another wave may come and you can ride that wave and let it settle out on the other side. Name it, notice it, breathe, stay. Feeling bad is not a threat. But being able to feel bad is the way to live an amazing life. Because when we can experience the depths of pain, we become available for the heights of joy. Recovery is not about finding peace and bliss and staying there. Recovery is about recognizing when we're out of balance or off the beam or out of peace and being able to return to it quicker. We're going to find ourselves in emotional states that are challenging and uncomfortable, especially if we're living life to the fullest. So how do we do this? It's important to create a pause. One of my favorite lines in a book about recovery says to pause when agitated. Well, how do we do that? Well, first, begin to recognize your reactions. Some of this will take doing it before you're in reaction to understand what parts of your makeup do you tend to go to when you're agitated or when you're upset. Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it shame? Is it something else? And once you can begin to know that about yourself, then when it comes up, you can notice it. And you might notice it before it happens, or you might notice it once you're already partway down the road in reaction. Either one is okay. but notice it, name it. When we can name it, say, oh, that's shame, or that's guilt, or that's my history. When we can name something, then we're not it. It is something that we're experiencing versus something that we are. And then locate it. Where are you experiencing it in your body? When we can break it down into the sensation we're experiencing, it moves from being anger, rage, sadness, guilt to heaviness in my chest, a lump in my throat, dryness in my mouth. And as we can locate it and we've named it, it can begin to settle a bit. So once we recognize it, then we want to release. That calls for us to stay with it. You can do a slow exhale, some movement, a practice of stillness. Call a friend. If you're somebody who prays, say a prayer. If you're not, that's okay too. But allow yourself to be with that emotion and that sensation that you've located. It's not going to just go away because you know where it is and you know what it's called. And the idea isn't to just have it go away. It's to be able to have the intensity of it settle so that we're not reacting to a survival level threat when the thing that we're dealing with does not call for that. That we want the intensity to release, and then we can return. So when we've been faced with an event, we've recognized it, we release it, now we can return to it, reassess calmly. And now we can choose our response rather than being driven by automatic reaction. In automatic reaction, we almost don't have a choice. I'm not saying people aren't responsible or accountable for how they react, but it happens so quickly that the people are engaged in it almost before they can even recognize it. With this practice, you can choose from all possibilities rather than being driven by automatic reaction. And sometimes the response that we're going to go in might be very similar to the reaction, but we might be doing it in a way that doesn't cause conflict. I often joke that I've gotten in more trouble in my life saying the right thing the wrong way. That there was something that I needed to deal with that was challenging, and instead of reassessing it calmly and approaching with curiosity and kindness, I went into automatic reaction to try to fix it, and that often came with destruction in its path. And that's not what we want to do. Real recovery is being able to feel pain without immediately reaching for relief. And that relief can sometimes come in the form of our automatic reactions, not just in our addictions. So real recovery is about being able to feel pain without reaching for immediate relief. Practice this. Let me know how it goes.